All right, everybody, we are live from the Boston Marathon Expo at the Cliff Bar booth. My name is Andrew East, and I'm sitting here with Ultramarathon legend, Scott Jurek. Scott, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me.
It's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
I gotta tell you, it's your fault that I'm here and running this marathon. It did not mesh with my football training schedule, but last year we were doing a warm-up run, and you so casually and nonchalantly told me that I could, in fact, run a marathon. I just had to put the work in and convince myself that I could. So I appreciate you believing in me, as you have with so many people. It's cool, the effect that you have in that sense.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I could instigate and motivate you to do something. I don't know if the NFL wants you to be out there doing a marathon, but
yeah.
I think you're going to do awesome. And it's going to hopefully help your season.
Thanks, man. Hey, I want to start with talking about something we both have in common. And I read this in your book, Eat and Run, that you do Pancake Sunday every Sunday. Is that still a tradition?
Try to do it as often as possible. Sometimes it turns into Waffle Sunday instead of pancakes. But when I was a kid growing up, usually one of the weekend days, we'd have some kind of special like breakfast, whether it was pancakes. And Jenny and I tried to start that as well. And so actually our 2.5-year-old daughter, Raven, she's like so pumped about it. In fact, she's always asking pancakes today? She wants them every day. So she doesn't quite understand it's on a Sunday, but it's a fun little tradition, and it kind of keeps us just having a mellow Sunday of, having pancakes, having something that would be a little bit more involved.
Yeah. It's something that Shawn and I started, and we count on carrying it into us having kids, and we're excited about that. But part of your legacy is your diet. Mm-hmm. And I believe starting in 1997, you became a vegetarian while you were doing all these ultra marathons. And then in 1999, you became a vegan. Can you talk about that and the effect that that's had on your career?
Yeah, it was one of those things. For me, it was a really tough shift. I was motivated to do it. I got inspired by reading a few books. Dr. Andrew Weil was a big inspiration. I read his Spontaneous Healing book, 8 Weeks to Optimal Health. These were books that started getting me thinking, okay, I could maybe go vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I gradually, got rid of the fast food 4 or 5 times a week. I mean, I was in my 20s, just finishing grad school, and I definitely did not have the most ideal diet, but I just really became intrigued of how can I incorporate more vegetables? And I was one of these kids who hated vegetables, like corn and carrots and potatoes were basically that was my vegetable array. And then after reading Mad Cowboy, it really made me shift to go towards vegan.
Okay.
And I thought if this third generation cattle rancher could go vegan, a hunting and fishing boy from Minnesota could do it. And Howard Lyman he spelled it out in a way of okay, I can go the full plant-based way. And it wasn't easy because at the same time I was also getting ready for my first Western States 100, the biggest ultramarathon of my life, so to speak, and the most competitive 100-mile race in the world. And 6 months before that, here I am going vegan. So it definitely messed with me right up until that time. So it wasn't an easy transition, but it was something that I decided, okay, I'm gonna stick with it. And like ultra running, I didn't think I could ever do something like, run 50 miles, 100 miles. It was something where I felt like this desire to challenge myself and see if I could pull it off.
And you've now done that for 20 years?
Yeah, almost 20 years now. It's kind of crazy that it's been that long, and I don't really look at it as this hardship. I mean, it gets a little trickier when I'm out, say, in rural settings, particularly in the U.S. But in general, whether it's airports or other places, I can usually find something to eat, even if I don't have all my food with me or certain staples. I do travel sometimes with protein powder in remote areas, but it's a fun way to eat, and I've really enjoyed it. And I'm still learning things, and that's what's fun. I love to cook. I love to spend time in the kitchen, and that's helped too.
Part of your bio is that you're an amateur chef. Is that right?
I mean, I don't know. I wrote 20 recipes. Yeah, I don't know what amateur chef is. I'm chef in training, you could say. I just grew up cooking with my mom in the kitchen. I love the idea of blending ingredients, learning from different cultures and ethnic cuisine, and that was something that was passed down from my grandparents, and just this importance of being connected to your food, whether it was from growing it in the gardens to harvesting it to preparing it into meals. There was this idea of like that was part of life. It was this lifestyle, and that carried through, especially, and it helped me when I became vegan because it wasn't easy. I was not going to be able to go to a restaurant and find food in northern Minnesota, nor could I afford to do that.
Right.
As an athlete and somebody going through grad school, the best way was to get in the kitchen and do it. And it's really, it's been a fun process from that standpoint. That's why I love hearing from other people that going plant-based kind of forced them to get in the kitchen and make their own food, which I think is one of the best steps to just even gaining better health overall. Even if you're not fully plant-based or vegan, getting in the kitchen, making some of or most of your own meals is a huge step in towards that like direction of optimal health.
Yeah, I'm an Indiana boy myself, so I get the struggles of a Midwestern diet.
Yeah, where Jell-O is considered salad. I don't know if you grew up. Maybe that was like going by the wayside. I'm a little older, but
that might be specific to Minnesota. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but Jell-O salads, we're all about them in Minnesota, Wisconsin. So maybe Indiana wasn't included in that, but so you haven't had carrots or marshmallows in Jell-O, and it's called a salad.
I love that though.
Yeah,
I do
pineapple.
It sounds delicious.
Yeah, right.
Actually, you mentioned Andrew Weil. His restaurant is True Food. Is that right?
I'm sorry?
Have you heard of True Foods? It's Andrew Weil's.
Yeah, I haven't been there, but
you got to go.
Oh, really?
It is delicious. It's Shawn and I's favorite restaurant.
No
it's
way.
It's amazing. Top to bottom, the menu is just delicious. And you walk out of there full, but not with that nasty feeling. So
I'd love to check it out. Yeah, I know he's gotten into doing more along the lines of restaurant and food service type stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'll have to check it out.
So we're here at the Boston Marathon. This is my first Boston. This is my first marathon in general. How many have you done? How many Boston marathons have you done, and how many marathons have you done?
I've done 4 Bostons, and Boston has always been a race that I give back. I've guided friends. I guided actually the founder of Cliff Bar, Gary Erickson, a couple of years ago. I've guided blind runners. So it's one of those things where, I don't know, it's been a race where I actually haven't run for myself.
Yeah. And
it's been kind of a fun tradition that I get out there and just enjoy the experience from a different angle, a different perspective. Yeah. But I've run, I don't even know how many marathons I've run. And that's not to include like when I've run a marathon as part of an ultramarathon, but I kind of lost track. I know I should probably keep track of those things, but I've run close to 100 ultramarathons, and I don't know how many just straight marathons.
Wow. So you mentioned the Western States, and you've won that 7 times? 7 times in a row?
7 times in a row.
And that's a 100-mile race.
That's a 100-mile race. Over the Sierras, starts basically in Squaw Valley, goes over the Sierras, drops down into the American River valleys, and ends up in Auburn, California, just outside of Sacramento.
Wow.
19,000 feet of climbing, 23,000 feet of descent. And it's a special race because for so many years it was the premier event when it came to 100 miles. It was the first trail 100-mile race out there, and it just has this steeped history and tradition. And then it was also the place, if you wanted to prove yourself against the best, you'd run Western States 100.
You've also done Badwater, and I believe at Badwater it brought you to your... Were you face down at some point during the race?
I mean, I was puking my guts out.
That's how I plan to feel on Monday. That's my game plan.
I mean, hopefully you won't be puking, but you might have moments where you're like, want to be face down. Although maybe the rain will prevent that. You won't want to be laying in a puddle somewhere. But I was literally laying, in a puddle of puke, just like at mile 80 thinking I was done. Like so dehydrated, so over it mentally. And somehow I got back up after getting some fluids in me, regrouping. I think it was after 20-some minutes. And then I got up and set a new course record.
That's amazing.
And I think that's the beauty, and that's where I would recommend for you on Monday. There'll be those times where you just feel like you're at rock bottom and maybe even then some.
Yeah.
And there'll be a way out of it. And that's where the magic of ultramarathoning, running, marathoning, it's getting out of those low points when you don't think you have a chance, and you've got to just quit or pull the plug.
So how do you have tips on how to get out of those low points? Like, is it drink some water or take a break? Or
I I think it's a little bit more deep. I think it's more mental than anything. Like, yes, if you're dehydrated, you've got to get fluids in. Or if you haven't been paying close to your nutrition and you haven't been eating every 20, 30 minutes and getting carbohydrate in, there are some mechanical things you can do. I call them just, changing the strategy, like getting that fluid in, getting the food in. But when it comes to actually like digging yourself out of a hole, so to speak, the mental component has to happen. So the first thing I like to do is have the emotions of like, I hate this. Why am I out here? You got to like let that out, the frustration, being upset if things aren't going well. And then after you've had the emotions, you can't stay there. You've got to like, okay, let that out, and then start thinking about, okay, what's my strategy to get back in the game? How can I make my situation a little bit better? And that's why you got to get out of that emotional state and start thinking, okay, can I, what needs to happen? Do I need more fluids in me? Or sometimes you just need a mental switch to shift and be, okay, how can I focus on something positive? If you're feeling bad, can I, get to the next aid station where there's, fluids or food? Can I get to the next, top of that hill that you can see? Putting small goals that seem manageable in front of you can help you get out of the funk of thinking, okay, I would just want to be home sitting on my couch. Like, why did somebody convince me I could run this marathon kind of thing? Or like, what was I thinking? Because I have those same thoughts, whether it's on the Appalachian Trail, running Western States 100, so many times throughout a 100-mile race or any type of race I've done, I come up with excuses or reasons what I could be doing differently, or why am I out here? This sucks. Because quite frankly, it is tough, and that's why we do these things. We want to experience the tough side, and getting out of the tough moments, there's like this incredible feeling of just accomplishment, satisfaction, self-worth, that you can't pay or have that experience until you go down to the dark and deep places.
Yeah, it's amazing. It was literally, I can pinpoint it to my conversation with you last year when I asked, what's the furthest you've ever ran? And you mentioned the 24-hour race that you did, where they sound the gun and let's just go for 24 hours. And you ran over 165 miles, is that right?
That's right, 165.7. So it's 6.5 marathons with some bathroom breaks. But there's a little bit of walking as I come through the support areas. But the crazy thing too is a 1 mile loop. So if you can imagine, doing that for 165 plus, because it was even less than a mile, it was like 0.9. Yeah. And that's the part, like 24-hour races that are held on a loop course like that are the hardest things, I think, mentally that one can do from an endurance standpoint. 24-hour bike rides that are on a loop, track races, it just messes with you so much. And it was, I call it the PhD of ultramarathoning or running, because it's like next level. Yeah. And I've only done a few of them.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun because the training for the marathon and the way you so nonchalantly said, you could do a marathon, it really unlocked in me potential that I didn't know I had, where it's like you free yourself up mentally, where the first run you go out and it's 2 miles and you're grinding it out. And, I've run 2 miles 4 times in my life before that. And then, 3 months later you fast forward and you're doing a 15-mile run and it's nothing. So it is fun. Just having you set the bar so high, for me, made the whole training process easy, because it was like, hey, look, this guy ran 165 miles. I could probably do this too. I'm curious if there's people in your life who have unlocked that potential of, hey, you know what, I didn't think I could do this, but seeing how they live and seeing how they think, who are those people in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was somebody like, my buddies Dusty and Hippie Dan. They were these individuals that, like, I was a hunting fishing boy. I come from the backwoods. You don't hang out with hippies. Yeah. And these guys, grew their hair long. They, my buddy Hippie Dan, he was...
Are you insulting my flow?
What's that?
You making fun of my hair?
No, okay. Long hair don't care. That's... Jenny won't let me grow my hair. She won't let me bring the mullet or the long curly hair. I used to have hair down to mid-back. She won't let me do that anymore.
Salt and pepper looks great.
Exactly. But yeah, they were, and so I started hanging out with these guys, and they just kind of made it seem like it wasn't anything to run an ultramarathon. And that's how I ran my first marathon. I ran my first marathon. A month later, I ran my first 50-miler. And they kind of made it seem like it was fun and cool. And seeing a guy like Hippie Dan talk about, he would run in blue jeans and show up to these races and do really well and win sometimes. And he just had this way about him, like describing the trail, describing the experience. It was just like this holistic idea of thinking, and it just took off with me. And then I had the young guys like my buddy Dusty and other people, and there was the guy who is a former Vietnam vet who had gotten into ultra running, and he was one of like the older guys who would teach us different things about the sport that maybe he wasn't the fastest, but he was just so mentally tough because of the background he had. And I think I just really related to those things. Having a mother with multiple sclerosis, having something like that, a chronic disease, that was a huge life changer for me and forced me to grow up really quick. Running was this way of like channeling some of the things that I learned with hardship in life. And so I feel like that's where what helps too for people who are new to the sport. Like if you've had tough experiences or your background might have been in another sport, I think you can carry a lot of those things into running. It's not all about the miles that you run or how much your training has allowed you to get to the finish line. It's probably more what's upstairs in your mind and what life experiences you have and take those. So when you're digging deep, you can curse my name on Monday, but you also have to find a way to get through that. And I think that's where the magic happens. Yeah. And I think it's cool that there's no perfect body type in running. Like if you want to win the Boston Marathon, you're probably going to have a certain body type. You're going to have a certain background. You're going to have some talent of some sort. But for the folks that are getting to the finish line from 4 hours and beyond, or 4 hours and under, they're channeling other things than just a body type or a certain level of fitness, and that's what I love about endurance. There's more than just running that gets you through it.
You mentioned body types. I am a little concerned. I don't exactly have runner's thighs, so I tried on a pair of the sweet shorts that I bought, Boston Marathon branded. Never worn a pair of shorts that short. And then, I'm not sure.
Never worn a pair of shorts that short?
That short. All the way up. But
so are you wearing your football warm-ups, I
think I'm going to have to just maybe go compression shorts and then figure something out to make it, put it over that to make it modest. But it is cool to be here and see such a diverse crowd and how many participants are running. Each one of them is different, comes from a different background. I want to get into your book that you most recently released. You have the first book that you wrote, Eat and Run, which is fantastic. Would highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the audience. I assume you've read it. And then North, which I believe the tagline is Finding My Way on the Appalachian Trail. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that experience of 46 days on the Appalachian Trail, running an average of 50 miles a day?
Yeah, first off, it was unlike any other challenge in my life. And I knew going in it was going to, that's probably why I saved something like that towards the end of my career, because I knew it was going to take me to places I'd never been before, figuratively and literally. I had not set foot on the Appalachian Trail more than a couple of times. I ran 20 miles of the 2,189 miles. But each day presented, it was like even though it wasn't a race, I was going after a record. Each day felt like a different 50-mile race. And each day had all of those miles stacked on top of it. And so mentally, it just became one of these, I'd go from these highs of finishing the day and feeling like, oh, that was amazing and that was awesome. I'm glad I got through all of that. And then I'd, literally an hour later, I'd be like, I can't believe I'm going to wake up and do this again and again and again and again. And that was the hardest thing mentally, to go from an extreme high of feeling pumped, seeing the progress, and then realizing in 6 hours I'm going to do this all over again. And that's what wore down on me day after day, the sleep deprivation, the physical injuries, and just the things that occur. and then to stack up this idea of like, okay, there's no, it almost seems like there's no end to it. And it's kind of cool in that way too, that it's just so tough, so difficult. I was in survival mode a lot of times, which you get bits of that in a 100-mile race or a marathon, but when you're out there day after day after day, it's, I don't know, it's like, yeah, it's next level mental grit, strength, whatever you want to call it, tenacity. It's, yeah, you're literally, even though I wasn't fighting for my life, I felt like I was just trying to survive each day.
Yeah. One thing I loved, and we mentioned this earlier, is you include your wife, Jenny, and her perspective of how to support you through those 46 days. And she's driving around in your black van called Castle Black, and just how does she prepare for 46 days on the road when there's no cell service on most of it. I just relate to that because Shawn and I kind of, play off each other. And a lot of times, you're in the spotlight and Jenny doesn't maybe get as much attention, but she plays a crucial role in that.
And all partners, friends who support each other, there might be somebody who's, say, whether they're getting the attention or they're getting more focus and support, and that is a hard thing. Like it's not easy to go out and do that, and at the same time, it's also rewarding. Like even though it's difficult, helping somebody achieve their goal. Like I've supported a lot of friends, crewed for a lot of friends, and it's still fun, even though you're not in that position of like doing the actual task. There's still this sense of like just wanting to help somebody achieve something that they're after. And she definitely had the more difficult job for sure. I mean, running, from point to point on the Appalachian Trail is one thing, but trying to find the locations and hoping I was going to show up at each road crossing and me counting on her being there, it was like that next level of trust that we don't often get tested or challenged. And then doing something like that with a spouse, partner, friend, it can either go really bad where some friends joke like that sounded like a recipe for divorce court, or like basically never talking to each other again. And I say that just because you have to go through so many difficult times, and you have to be willing to give and take and know when to push somebody, when to hold back. And Jenny was really good at having that balance of tough love and then also having that, support and love. And it's not easy because there were days where she was like, I didn't want to push you anymore because it seemed like I was going to lose you. Like she thought mentally I was going to not be the same person. Like she thought I broke, I was breaking. And that's where having the friends come in occasionally, because Jenny couldn't do it anymore. And I think having a loved one or friend, sometimes you need fresh support to come in. But without her, I wouldn't have gotten it done. And without her, we wouldn't have written the book either, too. Because she was pushing me more. It's like, no, the second draft wasn't good enough. You need a third draft. And I was just like, I was so over it and so done. Like the Appalachian Trail, we were just so worked. So many days we rather be on the trail suffering than trying to write a book.
So shout out to everybody at the expo who's not running the marathon, but who has supported your significant other or partner, whatever you want to call them. That's a crucial part in this whole thing, because it's a lot of training that goes into it and a lot of time that's sucked away.
And there's paybacks too. That's where now I'm going and supporting Jenny. I feel like that's the important thing is you got, whether it's somebody, they don't have to be a runner, but helping them do whatever they're focused on. I think there's that give and take. So now I'm paying my dues and paying back 46 days of crewing from Jenny. So when I go out, I'm the one who's taking care of the kids at the races now. And it's a fun way to be in a different position. So I think embracing that is important too, because everyone wants to feel like, okay, I got to run this race, or I want to do my thing. And whether it's a hobby or a sport, it's really easy to be like, okay, I've got to always have a goal. Sometimes it's good not to have a goal and help someone else. And definitely if you have a significant other, you better be giving them some attention too. Otherwise, it's not going to work out.
So obviously on the trail, there was so many physical barriers that you talk about, an injury, a quad injury that you had to overcome. But it was also written at a point in your life where you didn't know if you wanted to continue racing or what the next phase was. And people who listen to this show, it's called Redirected for a reason, because they're looking at some career pivot or they have had some major life pivot. I'm curious how you progressed through that.
Yeah, it was tough, and having a partner and spouse like Jenny, she was just kind of like, if you want to retire, like, don't keep going to these races and convincing yourself that you still have it. And mentally, I was just kind of battling that. I felt like I still had the physical abilities to run well, but I would get to some of these races and mentally I wasn't fired up. I didn't have that drive. I didn't have that passion. And that can happen at any point in life where you just kind of feel like, okay, someone can get stuck or just feeling a little burnt out. And for me, I loved running, and I was worried that if I just kept doing that and kept going back and not doing well and not being there mentally, I was going to just drop running altogether. And so for me, I needed to find something that challenged me and tweaked running in a way that was exciting and new, and so gave me something to be pumped about. And doing something like the Appalachian Trail was that challenge that I needed to, like, basically get the drive back. So my recommendation would be you have to find a way to tweak your activity, your career, your passion. And sometimes that's like giving back and just taking a different perspective, like volunteering within your field or within a profession or a group and acting as somebody who's in a different role. I think that could do it. Or finding a challenge that is like completely maybe bigger or completely out of your wheelhouse. That's always been helpful for me too, to get that perspective. And yeah, it's a difficult place to be in because again, I love running, and I didn't want to like have this bad taste in my mouth for it and just kind of like spin my wheels, so to speak.
Yeah. I love your approach when confronted with a tough decision was not just to stand there at the fork in the road and read books about it or consult, although I'm sure you did that. It was take action and then figure out where that leads you. So
I'm not going to say don't prepare, but for those who are stuck or who are like kind of questioning, what they're doing, again, maybe there's just like one little tweak you can do. Like, I didn't go into this challenge having everything figured out.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of fun to be more nimble, to be adaptable, and that's why I think we're at our best. I'm not saying cramming is the best solution always, but there's something about being thrown into a situation and having to figure it out.
Yeah.
And doing something difficult isn't in our nature these days with modern society. It's like find the easy way through. So I think sometimes going backwards or doing things in a different fashion where you don't prepare or don't have everything figured out beforehand, and just kind of go into it with like a different set of eyes, that can keep it fun and interesting.
Yeah.
What
are your goals now?
Well, Jenny and I have 2 little kids now that are definitely causing us to run around the house crazy and ragged, more than a different type of running around and a different type of sleep deprivation. But I'm really, after the Appalachian Trail, I needed some time to also like unwind from that experience. It was so big and on a different scale than what I had done before. So I've finally gotten to this point where I'm like pumped to go out and do something else. So I'm basically at that point of finding the next challenge for me, and in that phase of okay, what's going to be most inspiring. I've had like a few ideas, which I don't like to share because I like to keep it to myself until it actually happens.
Yep.
But I have a few things I've wanted to do, and it's just a matter of like figuring out like how am I going to make those exciting and what's going to get me most excited for it. So something big, and that hopefully happening in the next year.
Yeah.
So Castle Black will be a little bit more full. The van will be 4 people instead of 2, and it's going to be interesting with the kids, but it'll add a different dynamic to it as well.
Yeah, you have so much wisdom, and your approach towards life and being very intentional with everything you do really shines through, and especially in your books. Again, I would highly recommend Eat and Run or North if you haven't read it yet, but I'm curious, 3 takeaways that you've learned in your ultramarathon career that you would share with the audience.
Well, I think first and foremost, in order to have like longevity or being in a career pathway for a long time, and for me, I think the good thing is it wasn't my sole basically income source. Like running, I trained and raced as if I was a professional, but I had to work a job alongside of it, and I think that was a gift. So as much as sometimes a passion or a hobby or, hopefully a career move might not seem like something you can do full time, I think it's okay to have a job on the side and be passionate about something. I think that's what really helps. So the writer or, you probably know this too, in your line of work. You were saying you hadn't played a professional football game in 6 years, was it?
4 years.
4 years. And that's a hard position to be in.
Yeah.
But if you stick with it and maybe have some other kind of avenue, I think it's actually a blessing than a curse. So I feel like that's helped me through the years in maintaining that longevity, as I just wasn't running full time, and running wasn't my only, career at the time. Other things I would suggest is, I mentioned earlier, is you got to mix things up. At one point in my career, I was just one of these mountain trail guys, and I wasn't going to do any of the road races. Like Badwater, that seems stupid. Why would you want to run 135 miles on the road? Why would somebody want to run a 24-hour race where you just do loops for 24 hours? Those things early in my career, I thought, that's stupid. Who does that? And then here I am, I'm running Badwater, running Spartathlon, 153 miles on pavement. And I finally just kind of let things go of changing that mentality of okay, I don't want to do those things because they sound boring. They just don't sound intriguing. And I needed to switch things up throughout the career. And those events gave me a completely different perspective, and something that I needed to stay energized. So I could still go to the races like the Hard Rock 100 and set a course record. I always came back fresh from those experiences. So I think that's an important thing too, is, don't limit oneself into just the wheelhouses that you're comfortable with. Get outside of your comfort zone and respecting the ways that things are done at those races. The last thing I want to do is wear pants at Badwater and wear long sleeve shirt. That's what, I don't know, the real slow runners did, and that wasn't really a racing mentality. But again, I had to change my line of thinking and be humbled by the conditions and respect the conditions, and that's something too. So alongside, the last thing I would say is not just doing a sport or passion for your sole reward or just self-satisfaction. I think being able to give back throughout the years has helped me too, whether it's getting out to running clubs and speaking or giving up my time at races as a volunteer. I feel like that's something, or guiding with the visually impaired runners. All of these different nonprofit avenues has been important too to keep that fire going. So I feel like whether it's mentoring somebody, education, finding ways, whether it's, you name it, any type of career or passion, I think that's an important aspect of it. Taking a different step back and having a way to view something that you love to do.
Yeah. Scott, your encouragement, I think, is a huge part of your legacy, as is your energy and approach to your sport. You're known for kind of rolling across finish lines, and I think that kind of indicates how much you enjoy what you really do, and I think that's really appreciated. I appreciate you sitting here and taking the time, and I appreciate Cliff Bar providing the spot. They just came out with this new Boston cream pie flavor, so I'm pretty excited.
We're sitting here with a bunch of donuts. I think they're real donuts. I'm surprised nobody has grabbed into these.
I'm getting tempted back here. But anyway, I appreciate the time, Scott.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Yeah. I'd like to talk to you and ask you more questions, because I'm fascinated with what you do, and I think it's a real testament too to what you're opening up your mind to, run 26.2 miles. A guy that, his job is so critical in a matter of seconds, what has to occur in snapping a football. I've seen that occur so many times, but knowing the pressure and just what has to happen in that short of time frame, I'm just super pumped that you've looking outside of the box and doing something like running a marathon. It's fascinating to me that you're going to give it a go, and you're going to do awesome, and just wish you all the best Monday.
Appreciate that. I'll take you up
It's
on
going to hurt a little
topic.
bit. It's going to hurt a little bit, but
Can't wait. Thanks again, man.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Yeah.